he's looking at me hard. He's looking real hard, and I'm looking at him. Now I'm sweating. I'm trying not to show it, but heart's starting to beat faster and all that stuff. He's walking around the front of the van. I don't let the source know that I know this guy or not, but I've got the money. And he comes right up to my window. I don't roll the window down. I just look at him, and he's looking at me, give him a little, "What's up?" I'm Scott Payne, retired FBI agent, law enforcement for 28 years total. I was deputy sheriff at the Greenville County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina for 5 years, the last 2 of which I was a vice narcotics investigator. My FBI offices, my first office was New York City, still assigned there when 9/11 actually happened. It's just on that day I was undercover in Texas. And then I went to the border of Mexico for 6.5 years, and then I transferred to Tennessee, where I retired. So what led me to law enforcement? I didn't know I wanted to be law enforcement growing up through high school and all that stuff, but I guess it kind of went with my mentality, that kind of livestock guardian dog, shepherd mentality. I came out of college knowing that I wanted to be a cop, and I couldn't get a job. In South Carolina, I applied with 4 different departments and did the whole application process for all of them. Almost every one of them said, "Man, we would like to have you, but we're not hiring white guys right now." So I'm like, well, my bad. I didn't know that for the last 4 years. I might have picked a different career path. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office ended up picking me up, and that's where I became a uniformed cop, and that's where I cut my teeth, so to speak. And then I became a vice narcotics investigator because I just love that. I don't know, there's something fascinating about that to me. And when I finally made the squad, Northern Command Narcotics, I got the bug for undercover. You can go get certified at the state level in undercover techniques, and that's where it started. And I started making street level buys and running sources and actually doing thorough, longer investigations, things that you wouldn't be responsible for as a uniformed patrol officer. And then that was it. I loved it. I applied with the FBI at some point, probably after about 4 years at the sheriff's office, and I got picked up by the FBI in 1998. A lot of people, even within the United States, don't know that there's, on a federal level, there's not a domestic terrorism statute. So if you are a domestic terrorist and you are trying to do violent things to further your ideology, we're going to try to get evidence of whatever that is to get you off the street. You could be running a chop shop, stealing vehicles and changing out VIN numbers and putting vehicles back together. That's still a crime. Maybe we can get you for something across interstate lines. If you go to trial or when you arrest somebody and you use that undercover technique, the FBI considers the undercover technique a sophisticated investigative technique, and it's right up there with tapping somebody's phone. It's very intrusive. You have to show that you've exhausted your means on other traditional law enforcement things before. You can't just go willy-nilly and start a full-blown undercover operation. You have to show these things. If they feel that their ideology is threatened, especially if they feel their freedom's threatened, at any point they could break bad. There was a guy named Benchy. I talk about the case in the book. He is a white supremacist. He's a felon. He's been convicted. He's done time. And he starts showing up at white supremacist rallies. In this case, it was the actual Ku Klux Klan. He gets kind of naturalized to be a Klan member or whatever. He is spewing so much crazy stuff that people within the white supremacy community are saying, "Hey, y'all need to look at this guy because he's talking some crazy stuff, and we think he might be getting ready to do it." So let that sink in for a minute. White supremacists are saying, "Yeah, not this." So we learn about him, and I go meet him under a ruse. He thinks that I am an old Aryan Nation guy, an old skinhead who's been in the movement for a very long time, what I'd like to refer to as a closer. He has already picked a synagogue. He wants to shoot it up. He tells me that, and he's in South Carolina, and he tells me, just picture coming over that hill with a fully auto or just a big machine gun and just mowing these, and he says, "Sons of down." He kept saying, "I got the heart. I got the heart. I want to do something big." He wanted to shoot up the synagogue. He knew that they were going to have a family day and he wanted to mow them down. He just didn't quite know how to do it. Now, I can't tell him how to do it because that would be wrong. Plus, there would be a liability. We could be endangering people. I'm just letting him tell me what he wants. And at the end of the day, he did say that he wanted to do a big massacre, something huge. He goes, "How cool would it be if I did that and spray painted on the wall in big letters, "In the spirit of Dylan Roof." And generally in the tactical world, which I'm still hugely a part of, we never mention the bad guy's name. We don't do that. We refuse to say their name because we don't want to give them that credit. But since this podcast and we were actually talking about the Undercover, I will say that he said that in the spirit of Dylan Roof, who was actually going through trial at the time that I was meeting Benji and representing himself. So at the end of the day, I was able to slow him down a little bit, kind of point out to him, "You're pretty well known in this area. You've already been a felon." But I wanted to also make sure that I had the ticket. In other words, I didn't want him to leave our meeting and think, "I'm going to go meet some other people who can help me." I wanted to be his guy. So when he did decide to do something, if he decided to do something, he would call me. And he ended up calling me and asking if I could give him a gun. And I said, "What kind you want? How many rounds you want?" kind of thing. And we were able to deliver the weapon to him. He got arrested for being a felon in possession of a weapon, which is a good lick, a solid case because he wanted it. But again, here's a guy who's got some pretty crazy ideologies, wanting to do some bad things to some innocent people. And I'm handing him a gun. Yeah, something could go wrong. Do I know he doesn't have any other weapons on him? I don't believe he does, but could he? Yeah, he could. So there's always that kind of danger. On that case, I got arrested with Benji. They took us down in the parking lot. And then, of course, I was on my way home and they took him to the office and he confessed to everything. He said, he actually told them, from what they told me, that he was glad that they arrested him because he was really getting ready to do something bad. The skills that I had and my personality led me to more violent type stuff. That's just me, the way I grew up or whatever. You're going out with these guys who have these extreme violent tendencies, but right now they're okay. But we walk into a liquor store or something, who's to say they're not just going to lose it right then and there, especially when the guy working the counter is not white, and I'm like, "Oh boy, I hope it doesn't break bad right now." So there's always that chance that something could go south. We're not playing checkers, we're playing chess. This is a game of chess. We're trying to be 4 or 5 moves in our head ahead of the target, to be prepared, have contingencies, have backup plans. Because really, you're pitching me something. I don't know what you're pitching me, but I'm going to try to hit it and get it back to you. But I don't know what it is until you throw it my way. But generally speaking, the way I was taught, the way I teach is, if you're only doing this undercover because there's 2 SWAT teams on the other side of that door right there, that's probably not the reason to be doing it, and you shouldn't be doing it. Because if the crap's going to hit the fan, I can show you tactical video after tactical video. I can show you response team is on the other side of the adjoining door of 2 hotel rooms. Bad guy walks in, gets off 8 rounds before they can even get the door open. If something's going to hit the fan, you just need to be prepared the best you can for it. When I was a vice narcotics investigator, I was doing street level narcotics. And even though there might be big amounts, it's just that you weren't really deep undercover. The circles get pretty small. So if you're in a county, how many different ways can I shave my facial hair, get a different haircut, dress different, drive a different vehicle before, because you're still enforcing the law in your hometown, testifying, and before long, most people are going to know, hey, you're what they would call a narc or an undercover. So it's a little tough to go deep undercover, especially once you've been around for a while in your own area. And the FBI, a little different. At the state and local level, I won't give away tradecraft, but there's only so much backstopping you can do. You can try all kinds of things on your own, but as far as withstanding heavy scrutiny with today's social media and smartphones and searches and facial recognition and everything, it'd be tough. So let me give you an example. My first undercover drug buy, the first thing I really did undercover, my trainers, I mean, I'm sure they were getting a kick out of it, but here I am about 270 pounds, and they're handing me $20 to drive down to a corner, high drug trafficking area, and I'm going to hand a 20 out the window and ask for a 20. And at that point in time in the mid 90s, it was crack. So it's 1 rock of crack cocaine was $20. And that was my first crash course, scared to death kind of thing. If you talk to the undercover community, especially if you've been at the state and local level, we'll say the same thing. It's more dangerous to drive down to that corner and buy that $20 crack rock from a user a lot of times than it is to be deep undercover making huge deals A lot of times you'd show up on your shift, your counterparts on the narcotics squad have buys scheduled, and they're going to run a source in there, but it's always better for prosecution, even though I'm not technically the undercover making the deal, but I'm in the car with the source who's making the deal. It just helps. So I show up one day to work. It was cold and nasty and wet. One of the guys, I can't remember exactly how it went down, but it's very common to be like, "Hey, Scott, we're getting ready to go. I got my source coming in. He was going to make a buy. You mind hopping in the car with him?" No, not at all. Not a lot of foreplanning, not a lot of surveillance or anything done. You're just going to go make a street level buy. Well, we're rolling around the corner of this again high drug trafficking area, and the way it kind of worked on that corner is you had somebody that ran the corner, a drug dealer that ran it, so they're higher up in the organization, and then they're overseeing that corner while maybe users are the ones actually selling the crack rocks. So we ride around the corner, and I'm with this source. And when we come around the corner, I look and I see the guy running the corner. I could tell by where he's standing and kind of the way he's running everything. And I was like, oh, man, because I don't forget faces. I suck at names, but I never forget faces, body compositions. We came around the corner and I looked, and it's a guy that approximately 2 weeks earlier I'd helped either Central Command or Southern Command do a search warrant. And when we hit the house, the room I went in had this guy in the bed. And I jerked that guy out of the bed and cuffed him, arrested him, took him back to the command center, was building rapport with him, talking about tattoos and where did he get his and this, that, and the other. And that's the guy on the corner. So clearly our law enforcement action from a couple of weeks earlier didn't deter him from going back out there and slinging dope. But when I ride around the corner and I'm in that passenger seat, I'm like, oh man. And he's looking at me hard. He's looking real hard. And I'm looking at him. Now I'm sweating. I'm trying not to show it, but heart's starting to beat faster and all that stuff. And he remains eye contact with me and walks all the way. It's just slow. Of course, it's slowing down in my mind too, because now I'm getting tunnel vision. He's walking around the front of the van. I don't let the source know that I know this guy or not, but I've got the money. And he comes right up to my window. I don't roll the window down. I just look at him and he's looking at me, give him a little, what's up? And he saw the money in my hand and he was like, go ahead. So when we did arrest him, he's like, man, I knew you were a cop. And I was like, you almost knew I was a cop. I said, you had some doubts, as it usually does in the criminal world. Greed won that day. I've had other ones where you get dropped off. We're talking again, mid 90s to late 90s, and weed was a much bigger illegal narcotic than it is these days, if at all. It seemed like every time I would go buy weed from somebody, it was always more of like a closer friendship kind of deal, like sit down, they want to burn one with you. It's kind of like almost like a family get together, a lot more personable than pulling up to a street corner and a bunch of people surrounding your car slinging dope at you. But I remember being in one place, I'm looking at the brother of this guy and I'm like, oh, I remember this dude, man. I arrested him when I was in uniform. He looked at me and there was a double barrel shotgun, and he says, hey, my brother says you're a cop. Now, I came up with something on the fly. I started denying, counter accusing, but in my mind, I was like, yeah, your brother's right, because I arrested your brother when I was in uniform. That's the nature of the beast a lot of times at the local level, but because you're working that one area. You generally, the public thinks the FBI, they think of a three-piece suit, clean shaven, short hair. Going to New York City right out of the gate, I was sucking it up. I mean, I was a single guy at the time. I was having a blast. And plus, me being a single guy and a former cop, I ended up on the Columbia Narcotics Squad. So we had a bunch of NYPD detectives on that squad. I would stay out with them on the late hours doing surveillance and stuff because I didn't have a family and I was single and I loved to work. It was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I think in my 23-year career with the FBI, I was listed as a full-time undercover twice. So in my experience, it was rare. You're a case agent first. The whole time I'm doing these undercovers, like I said, except twice, I'm still responsible for my own investigations, my own source development, and all that stuff. But in the FBI, I started doing cameos in New York City, and a cameo is much like it sounds. It's just if you're thinking of a cameo appearance in the movie industry or whatever, that's it. I'm coming in. It might be a one-time meet. For instance, let's say Los Angeles takes off of 3,000 pounds of marijuana, and it's supposed to be delivered to New York. Well, now Los Angeles cuts us a lead and says, hey, we took off this load. It's supposed to come to this address kind of thing. We work with the United States Attorney's Office, and on that particular case, that assistant United States attorney wanted a box We had to make it look like the other box that was going to be delivered, but he wanted some kind of signal inside of it so we would know once we drop package off to the Jamaican gang, drive off, we will actually know that that box has been opened to just help tighten up the case. So that's what we did. So that's a cameo. I showed up, me and a buddy of mine who was a NYPD detective, Bert. We drove a big old truck and delivered the 3,000 pounds of weed. So that's a cameo. So I was doing stuff like that. It's all voluntary. That's a lot of people think, they just don't know. In the FBI, a lot of people don't know that the undercover program is 100% voluntary. The only thing I was required to be from being hired as an FBI agent was to be a case agent. Everything else was a collateral duty. I volunteered for it. I put in and I tried to make a name for myself. And then you start getting called for different cases. Even when I went to Joint Terrorism Task Force, I'm still working dope. Everything had a drug nexus. Even if I was working area nation and I was the case agent, they were slinging the you know what out of crystal meth. So the drugs kind of ebb and flow through different violations that I've worked. But again, I started on the Colombian Drug Squad in New York City. I'm brand new as an agent. These are big squads, big cases. It's not like when you go to a smaller office where you're just thrown into the frying pan right away and you're working something from beginning to end. I really didn't hone my skills in as a case agent until I got to McAllen, Texas. Once I finished that undercover in San Antonio, I transferred down to one of the satellite offices out of San Antonio. We call them resident agencies, so it's an RA. I went to McAllen for 6.5 years. That's where I really cut my teeth and learned how to make great airtight cases as a case agent. And I was working dope at first because, I mean, we're on the border. But then it came in and we started changing, the FBI started changing our focus, not particularly just drugs. And maybe gangs that are involved in drugs, but you're working gangs. And one of the things that came through the pipe was special interest alien smuggling. So I'm down on the border as an FBI agent and not necessarily working straight up human trafficking or alien smuggling. It was special interest aliens. So we were looking for people being smuggled into the United States from threat countries like China, like Russia, Iran, places like that. I switched right over to it pretty seamlessly because it's still the same Gulf cartel. Even though we're not moving dope, now they're moving people, but they're still smuggling organizations. They still have to pay their quotas to the cartel to move people through their territory. And if they don't, the Zetas back then were the enforcement arm for the Gulf cartel, and they would kidnap you and beat you and sometimes even worse. I was already working with Border Patrol as an FBI agent on a drug squad. So once I switched to the terrorism task force and it was like, hey, this is what we're working, I just went to all my contacts and said, hey, still want to work with you guys, but now I'm not looking for this necessarily more. I'm looking for this. And that's what we started working. There's some heartbreaking stories in there because you can look at it from different facets. If you look at it from a humanitarian standpoint, yeah, it's sad. And there's a lot of heartbreaking stories. But if you look at it from a law enforcement standpoint, there's still going to be some heartbreaking stories, but you got to enforce the law. At least that was always my argument. And then things changed over the last several years, but now they're swinging back. I've always said, look, I'm just a law enforcement officer. We're peace officers. We take an oath to serve and protect. If you don't like the law, then get the law changed. Is kind of the thing. But like you would see the craziness of human trafficking. A 16-year-old mentally and physically challenged female was left to die in the brush. Border Patrol encounters her. They pass her to Child Protective Services. And Child Protective Services is able to figure out, look, she's part of a Honduran family. A lot of them have already been here illegal. They were smuggled in and they're in Manassas, Virginia. And they also figured out, hey, she came in with her other sister and her niece. And once we make contact with that family in Virginia, they're telling us, hey, the smugglers got them across the river and then they hold them at a staging point before they walk them around the checkpoint. This is Rio Grande Valley stuff. And they're demanding more money. They're telling us our 5-year-old daughter is sick and that they're going to dump her in the brush and let her die if we don't give them more money. So now they're extorting them, even though they've already paid their price. And now the hunt's on for us to try to find and rescue this 5-year-old girl. And, 48 hours or more trying to find this person, trying to find this phone. And that story ended with a success. We were able to apprehend the bad guy, found the right phone, found the ledgers. After an intense interrogation, he took us to the stash house, the staging location, and we rescued, I don't think of that day, it was like 49 undocumented aliens. 9 were Chinese, and they were in a house that had bars on the inside on the windows and doors and bars on the outside. And we rescued everybody and saved the 5-year-old girl, put her in touch with her mother, and that one ended well. But there's some crazy stuff back then working the border. I did 2 years in the Outlaw Motorcycle Club, and at about a year and a half in, they pulled me into a very tiny, small basement and stripped me at gunpoint looking for a wire. Problem was is I was wired to the hilt, and they almost found it. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with that. It was very scary, and they missed it by a hair. We were able to pull off the deal. The bookends of the book are me infiltrating this group called the Base, which is a violent white supremacy group worldwide. Not just what you think the typical person thinks of white supremacy. They're accelerationists. They don't believe there's a political solution to save the white race. They believe society is going to collapse on its own or from man-made events, and they want to speed that up. So we infiltrated that group, and that's kind of the beginning of the book, and it ends the book. But in that case, there was satanic rituals, the stealing of a goat or ram, which was sacrificed at a pagan ritual that I took part in. But again, when I say pagan, let me clarify, not just pagan. I've got great friends who are pagans, and they're of that belief system, Masatru, and they're very peaceful, nice people. Much like white supremacy groups take the Bible, Christian Bible, and twist stories to their ideology, they were twisting pagan beliefs and Norse mythology to their mythology. But in that twisting, a goat was stolen, sacrificed at the ritual. We drank its blood and cut its head off and carried it around with us for the next 3 or 4 days training. So there's a lot of crazy, wild stuff, murder for hire stuff. I hope I made a difference the whole time. I mean, like a lot of people, like, let's say you get into the war on drugs. Is it ever really winnable? My personal opinion, not as long as it keeps coming in. It's a supply and demand kind of thing. But can we take off a huge load and dry up our county for the next month or two? Yeah, we can. And is that making an impact? I believe it is. But I would like to think that everything that me and my mentors and the people that are my peers and the people I've been blessed to mentor, all the stuff we do, I truly believe we made a difference. I think the biggest thing for me is that I am a workaholic, and I took the warrior mentality and I applied it to every facet of my life. I believe personally, first responders having a warrior mentality is imperative to our skill set. But if you put it to everything, it can be detrimental. And that's what I did. I stopped taking care of myself, forgot how to relax. I was burning the candle at both ends. I was eating days off. I wouldn't take them off because I would be undercover and I didn't want management to be mad. And cumulative effect, after a 3-year period, I crashed physically and mentally. I was done. I took a break, and then you try to learn. For me, I wrestled with how can I be humble and get back to being who I was, kind of thing, or even close. So I dealt with that. You have to figure out how you ended up there, what happened to get me there, how I can avoid that from happening again and get better. And that's what I did. But if I could leave your listeners with one thing, I would just say this for first responders and law enforcement. Generally, that goes for military too. We are number one in divorce. We're number one in alcoholism. You can throw in pills, whatever you want there. And if we're not number one, we're very high to dying within 5 years after retiring. So if you hear that, you got to ask yourself, why would you sign up for that? And that's what we're trying to do better as first responders in the military community, in the law enforcement community, fire, medic. It's just got to stop. If you're out there and you're going through that, just know you've got people. If you can't find them at your department, I get that, because you don't want to tell somebody in your department, go somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with you. You are in a very high stress, not a lot of reward from the public these last many years because of some bad actors doing some bad things that got pushed out there nationally. It's a tough gig, but just know that that you can call a hotline. You go to church, find you a church counselor. And if it doesn't work, then go find another counselor. The way I like to explain it to especially type A personalities is, look, it doesn't mean you're weak. Your brain needs to be taken care of. Your mental health needs to be taken care of, just like your physical fitness level. These psychologists and counselors, they have a toolbox loaded with tools. If I told you to build a house and all I gave you was a hammer, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a long, but if I gave you this awesome stack of tools, man, you could build that house so easy and so quick. So just fill your toolbox with more tools, because one is too many.